Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Top of the morning to you. I got a big surprise for you. We're going to do detective stories. Here's how it happened. By the way, I hope you have your hot or your cold drink. I got my red cup. There's actually nothing in it right now because the hot drink of choice today is a chai tea. Anyway, this is what happened. I love the Father Brown stories from GK Chesterton. And I have the omnibus here. And I've read through them several times. I was reading through the Secret Garden, the Father Brown series. And it got to the point where it says, when I first saw how the head had been slashed, I supposed the assassin had struck more than once, but on examination I found many cuts across the truncated section. In other words, they were struck after the head was off. Did Brain hate his foe so fiendishly that he stood sabering his body in the moonlight? Horrible, said O'Brien, and shuddered. And then I realized I wanted to murder people too. Which I kind of stole from another Chesterton book at the end of his autobiography. He kind of said the same thing. He was joking about himself. And, he's an old man at this point, and he's reflecting on his life. And he said his autobiography is really good. I suggest you read it. In the last chapter, The God with the Golden Key, he says, or second last chapter. He says, some time ago, seated at ease upon a summer evening, and taking a serene review of an indefensibly fortunate and happy life, I calculated that I must have committed at least 53 murders, and been concerned with hiding about 100 corpses for the purpose of the concealment of crimes, hanging one corpse on a hat peg, bundling another into a postman's bag, decapitating a third, and providing it with somebody else's head, and so on, through quite a large number of innocent artifices of the kind. And he was talking about his Father Brown series, is where he committed all those murders. And so anyway, it was kind of funny. I had been thinking about an idea where I could write a detective story. I'm not going to tell you too many details because some of them are going to be a surprise. But I was kind of recently spitting around the idea, could I write a detective story related to Father Brown somehow, and what GK Chesterton did. And then inspiration, if that's what it is, struck, and I was like, okay, this is going to work. So without further ado, my idea is to, part of it was I was listening to a podcast about stories and then the importance of of reading out loud and just the read story. So, I don't know, there was like 100 things all at once, and then it all came together. So, broetry is going to sort of expand into just the whole literary works, and probably what it's going to be is at least once a month, the first Saturday of the month, we'll do a new installment, a new dead body, or a new crime that the new detective, the new modern detective, priest detective, Father White, is going to solve once a month here on Pomcast. So here we go. I'm going to present to you for the first time ever a new priest detective for the Father White detective series. Get your favorite hot or cold drink. Get your red cup. Get a pipe. I'm not going to use a pipe because I'm going to be reading. And sit back and enjoy the first story in the Father White detective series. The title is The Center of the World. Between the silver ribbon of morning and the green glittering ribbon of the harbor, the ferry Dorothy Day landed on Staten Island. The passengers from Manhattan flooded into St. George Terminal. One of the passengers, Father White, of the Order of Preachers, stood out because of his distinctive all-white flowing habit and black leather belt and black shoes. He had on also black Warby Parker-style glasses, although they were made by a small company in England, so no one in the New York City port would have recognized the brand. His black glasses were made in England because, incidentally, so was Father White, O.P. In fact, he was recently flown in from there to assist in the planning of the great Eucharistic procession to Indianapolis, the capstone of the American Eucharistic Revival. He landed in JFK Airport, was picked up by Father Smith, O.P., who drove him to St. Joseph's in the Village, where their order runs a center for college students. After some tea, which was not as readily available in the priory as Father White was used to, he was anxious to map out the proposed route for the procession as soon as possible. Unfamiliar with the city, he set out promptly with lots of courage, but little idea of how to navigate the place called by outsiders the center of the world, and soon found himself reaching the farthest edge of that supposed center. He had taken the wrong subway train and ended up on the Staten Island ferry. He was lost. That is not to say everyone who ends up in that forgotten borough is lost, but Father White, O.P., emphatically was. And he was alone. The other friars were busy with their chaplaincy work. There was a big meeting, some kind of theology on tap or some name like that Father White could not remember. And they were doing a holy hour of reparation because someone had recently stolen the sacred host from their chapel. So there he was, lost and alone in St. George Ferry Terminal. He did what most people would do in such a situation. He found the nearest policeman. NYPD's finest represented the city well to the visitor from England, and one of them offered a warm smile as he greeted the approaching cleric. "Hey, Father, what's doing?" "I'm afraid I'm lost," said Father White, referring not only to his physical location, but to the particular dialect with which the officer spoke. Father White, though English, actually had American parents. He himself spoke more like an American than an Englishman, but the officer's cadence and phraseology was not what he was used to hearing. The nearby bomb-sniffing dog began dutifully smelling the priest when the officer continued. "No problem, Father. Where you headed?" Father White pet the dog. The cops told him not to because the dog was working. Father White explained that he was working on the upcoming procession, which the officer had never heard of, and that he was trying to get to Madison Square Garden, which the officer had heard of. Officer Fernandez, for that was his name, broadened his smile and gave him directions back to Manhattan, which Father White immediately determined to follow when, only 15 feet away from them, a hooded figure sprinted past them with a kind of bag or purse clutched in his arms. Someone started yelling. Officer Fernandez started pursuing. So did Father White. Sometimes in life there are moments when you do something, who knows why, and that weird something turns into one of the biggest things of your life. For Father White, chasing a cop, chasing a criminal, was one of those weird somethings. In fact, he did it for the rest of his life. The criminal boarded the train before Fernandez and White could see where he went, but they followed the trail of turned heads and toppled pushcarts and knew he must have entered the train. They boarded too. Fernandez, who up until then did not realize White was following him, turned and said, "Father, what are you doing here?" He cursed and told the priest to get back. Then it was White's turn to offer a big smile, showing all of his teeth, as if to say, "I actually do not know why I'm following you, but don't we have bigger fish to fry?" That smile came instinctively and without thought. If he had not done it, he would have lost his courage and realized the foolishness of his actions. Not to mention it would have given Fernandez time to definitively bawl him out. But the brazen smile disarmed the cop. Emotionally, not materially, of course, for his gun was already drawn. That smile was another weird something that should not have happened, would not have happened on a million other occasions. But it happened that one time, just as it happened when he started chasing the cop a minute ago. Two once-in-a-lifetime actions led to the rest of his lifetime being what it was. Somehow, that idea also sprouted in his head at that very moment. And so it was, with what New Yorkers call a S curse word eating grin on his face, Father White somehow knew he had just become a detective. Fernandez knew it too somehow, and let White follow him. "Come on then," the cop said to the priest. The train moved with a jerk from the station. They both started to stalk through the train looking for the hooded man like lions on the prowl. Fernandez had a gun. White had a rosary. "Hey, keep your head down and your eyes open. Yell if you see something," said the cop. White nodded silently in consent, although Fernandez could not see it because the priest was behind him. As it turned out, they never found the criminal on the train. They checked every car by the time they reached Duncan Hills, but their prey was gone by then. Officer Fernandez suggested they keep going and get off at the Oakwood Heights station. He wanted to see his friend who was a teacher at a local high school, an ex-cop who taught history. "Why should we see him about this?" asked Father White. "Because he knows lots of young people, and that perp looked pretty young to me." That made sense to Father White, although, he reflected, he really had no way of knowing what did or did not make sense in a criminal investigation. So he decided to follow the expert without question. As they made their way through the aptly named Oakwood Heights section, it was both filled with oak trees and was significantly higher than the surrounding areas. His mind wandered to things more connected to his own expertise. Like the train from St. George to Tottenville, Father White followed an idea in his mind from one stop to another. He was even aware that he was following a train of thought, and so laughed to himself a little. Fernandez knew about criminals and how to stop them, while he himself knew about heretics and how to stop them. An interesting parallel that molded into one reality ever since the Emperor Gratian. Then it dawned on him that the Dominicans had had a special role in the detective work against doctrinal criminals ever since the time of St. Thomas Aquinas, who was undoubtedly Sherlock Holmes in the analogy. "Do you know any Dominicans?" White blurted out as they walked along the sidewalks, which inexplicably stopped and started several times. No. I'm Spanish a little, but mostly Irish." Right. Father White realized that the cop neither knew what his brand of friar was, nor why the question was asked. "No, I meant that I am a Dominican. I just wondered if you knew any others." "Yeah, I guess. Knew tons of them. There was a girl in an apartment I lived in Bay Ridge." Both of them were confused, so they politely let the conversation die. It was just as well because they had arrived at the school. "Are we going to the school?" asked Father White. "Yeah," said Fernandez. "He texted me that he ain't home. He said yous guys come to the school. It's off hours, but he'll let us in." He did not let them in. In fact, Fernandez called his cell phone several times, but he did not answer, and they waited at the front door for some time. Fernandez said, "Come on." They walked around the corner of the building to another door. With one motion, the uniformed officer turned the handle and rammed his shoulder into the door. It opened with a bang. That a cop could do that seemed natural to Father White. They walked into the dark building, the last light of sunset haloed above the oak trees. A train rattled loudly by. It is funny what people think about at such moments, and Father White could always remember that he thought the passing train, with its mechanical rhythm of crashing wheels, was dramatically romantic. Before he could censor himself, he actually said it out loud to Fernandez, who, much to White's surprise, laughed. The slight chuckle echoed down a long empty hallway. Their heels clicked on the hard floors, and Father White felt that it was bad detective work. They were probably putting themselves in danger by being so loud. Fernandez did not seem to mind. He walked very coolly and looked relaxed. White was not relaxed. The reality of the situation was waxing in his mind, and this allowed more rational thoughts to flow. Why on earth did he start chasing a criminal through a city he knew nothing about? What were the other friars thinking? Would they have already called the police? Would the police get in touch with Officer Fernandez? As his mind was preoccupied with these things, he was mindlessly following Fernandez through the school. He seemed to know the way. "You seem to know your way around," said White. "Yeah," smiled Fernandez. "I went here. '02. Building's the same, except I heard they got new lab equipment and stuff. That's where my buddy said he was, in the lab." "Okay. Oh, I say." White noticed something down the hall. "What's that?" There was a faint red glow, maybe an exit light. But he knew it was not that. Fernandez smiled with the pride of a cop, a Spaniard, an Irishman, an alumnus, and a Catholic, but mostly with the pride of a student who knows the answer to a question. "That's the sanctuary lamp. Chapel's down there." The Dominican nodded and felt slightly better about everything. But he was still uneasy and a little angry with himself for coming this far. It is one thing to embrace the first flush of inspiration and enjoy the thrill of knowing you're on a grand adventure, that Providence has led you on a quite unexpected but certainly wonderful new path. That is one thing, but the creeping nighttime of doubt soon covers even the noblest of endeavors. And doubt had crept over Father White like the literal nighttime creeping over Staten Island. Manhattan seemed very, very far away. He looked wistfully at the red glow again and closed his eyes in a burst of wordless prayer. He quietly exhaled a long breath. A door banged somewhere above them. "That's from the classroom upstairs," yelled Fernandez, who was galvanized with a rush of energy. "Tommy!" he yelled. "That you, Tommy?" He ran towards the sound. Father White followed him instinctively again like he did at the terminal, but a little begrudgingly this time. They went very quickly to the top of the stairs. Both men were in good physical condition, where Fernandez held a hand up to silence White. Fernandez took out his gun again. White remembered thinking he wanted a gun too. Not for protection, but to feel more like a real detective. They tried to be quiet as they entered another very long, dark hallway. The only light was coming from both ends. They padded along a few steps until they were both startled into silence. Against the bright portal of the far end, they saw the shadow of a human figure in perfect silhouette. A young person in a hoodie. He was holding a bag. It was the thief from the terminal. "Stop, NYPD!" screamed Fernandez. So did White, which made Fernandez frown at him and made White feel a little embarrassed. To their surprise, especially White's, the person did stop. He knelt down, put the bag down, and put his hands up. "Don't move," said Fernandez. The person was not moving. Fernandez put him in handcuffs and told him his rights. White could not believe his good fortune, an arrest on his first case. Fernandez was happy too. He turned to Father White and said, "Hey, congrats, we pinched him." White was smiling as he turned around. Fernandez watched him and felt happy for the priest. But then White's face blanched. He was looking down at a shadow among shadows, a pool of darkness moving on the floor. It was slowly oozing from one of the classroom doors. Somehow they both knew it was blood. Fernandez blurted out, "Tommy!" Tommy was dead on the floor when they entered the classroom, bludgeoned to death. The hooded figure began crying quietly. "Oh God, Tommy." The NYPD-trained Brooklyn native checked Tommy's pulse. If he was at first shaken at the death of his friend, Officer Fernandez imperceptibly changed back into the cop who was not shaken at the death of a citizen. He said with the tone of a professional, "Nothing doing. He's dead." The hooded man began crying loudly. Fernandez asked him the obvious question. "You do this?" He did it. He admitted it freely and with remorse, thought White. After years of hearing confessions, he knew well what real remorse looked like. White felt bad for him. Then Fernandez followed up with the next obvious question. "What's in the bag?" "Nothing." That is what the teenager kept repeating between sobs. The cop and the priest had the distinct impression it was not nothing. "What's in the bag, kid?" Fernandez roared, losing his patience. The room was silent momentarily, and for some reason both the boy and the cop looked sheepishly at the priest. Father White could not immediately understand what those looks meant, but he intuited that it was related to the culture of the psychological remnants of Christendom caught in the bubble of New York City. Suddenly, without a word being spoken, the priest was in charge. Fernandez put his gun away and ran his hand through his hair. As they all tried to decide on the right move, the priest who had never led an investigation before, the cop who had never ceded an investigation to a citizen before, and the young man who had never committed a crime before, as they thought in silence about the next right move, a sound became audible. Tick, 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 tick. It went in rapid succession. It was definitely a ticking clock. It was coming from the bag. "Geez, is it a bomb?" White asked the teenager, less out of fear than out of disbelief that his first case suddenly had a bomb in it. He almost laughed. The cop did not laugh. "Kid, what's in the bag?" For the first time the young man spoke. "It's not a bomb," he said. His voice was high-pitched. His voice made him seem twice as young as he looked. "It's ticking like a bomb, kid," Fernandez forcefully interjected. The criminal turned to Father White and pleaded, "Father, it's not a bomb, I swear, but please, please don't open the bag, Father." With a murder victim spread-eagled on the floor, blood pooling near the murderer's feet, and a cop slightly perspiring, wide-eyed at his side, Father White became cool and collected. It was a trick he learned from confession. The bigger the crime, the calmer the priest. Lying in the pulpit, lamb in the confessional, he heard a whisper in his heart from his seminary days. "Okay, my friend, why can't I open the bag?" he said in a conversational tone. "Oh, Father, please don't open it," was all the young man could yell after several inquiries. He began hyperventilating and said, "Oh, Father, don't open it. It will kill you. It will kill..." And then he passed out. Fernandez caught him before he hit the ground. Fernandez laid the youth on a laboratory table and checked his vital signs. "He's all right, Father. But we might not be. That bag is a bomb. We can't open it. It might blow up. I've seen this type of stuff before. It has the shape. It has the smudges. It has metal clanging in it. It's ticking for..." He was going to blaspheme, but caught himself as he looked apologetically to the priest. "He ran away from us because he didn't want our dog to sniff out the bomb. It's that simple. Then he got caught by Tommy and..." Tears came to his eyes, but his voice remained steady. Father White, without any warning, took 2 strides, stooped over the bag, and opened it. Fernandez jumped back and cursed. "But Father, how'd you know it wasn't a bomb?" Officer Fernandez, recently promoted because of his case with Father White, was sitting with the priest on a pier overlooking the East River. Boats were riding over waves that were surprisingly choppy, and helicopters periodically landed close by. They were eating Italian ices. Father White leaned forward so the colored treat would not drip onto his white habit. He went to bite some of his dessert, and some of it fell to the ground. As he made sure to avoid it getting on his clothes, his glasses almost fell off. He smiled, and Fernandez laughed at him. He laughed too. The sun was shining brightly in a blue sky. "Come on, Father. How'd you know? It's been, 3 weeks since the case, and still you ain't told me how you knew?" "Well," said the priest, "I am pretty good at keeping secrets. My job, you know." They laughed again. "But this is not a confessional matter, I guess, and my reasons for being silent are over. Our young Anthony we arrested, it's still weird for me to say, he has been tried and Tommy's funeral is over, and I've cleared my head a bit, so yeah, I'll tell you." A foghorn bellowed loudly. Sunlight flashed off the water. Fernandez had sunglasses on and civilian clothes. Father White almost never wore civilian clothes except for hiking and such things. For some reason, his very uncamouflaged clothes never hindered him much in his long career as a detective. That was a blessing because he liked to wear them and would have been pained to remove them for professional necessity. "So, Father," said Father White, "here's how I knew the bag didn't have a bomb in it. Let's start with why you thought it must have been a bomb. You saw the telltale signs, and Tony ran away from the bomb dog." "Who's Tony?" "Anthony, the criminal," replied Father White. He was a little shy and wanted to downplay the fact that he played an important role in advocating for him during trial. He ruffled his own hair a little and said, "I got to know him visiting in jail, remember? So, yeah, Tony ran from you. That all added up to make us think it was a bomb at first. But then, after he passed out, I knew it was not a bomb." Father White inhaled and exhaled deeply. He took a bit of his ice before he started speaking again. "You would have figured it out before me, but I knew something you didn't." "What's that?" "I knew a host had been stolen from the chapel and that it, along with the sacred vessels, were still missing when I met you on Staten Island." Fernandez looked inquisitively at him. "And?" He still did not know what was in the bag after all. That was part of the confidential agreement Father White worked out with the court. The cop could not yet make the connection of a church break-in with their bomb case. "Well, like I said Father White, I knew the host and metal vessels were stolen. You might not have recognized the sounds clanging in the bag, but I knew them to be ciboria or some such things. Not definitive evidence for sure. That would have been all guesswork. But here's where I started to connect the dots. When Tony said it would kill me, but that it also wouldn't kill me. That was the key. Following?" Fernandez, judging by his face, was not following. "It's like this. He said it to me, not you. If he'd said it to you, then I couldn't have figured it out. See?" He didn't see. White continued, with a little zeal now, like a hound picking up a scent again. "The phrase was the key. It would kill me, the priest, to see it, not the cop. Kill me, but not kill me. Rather, as I began to see in that laboratory, he meant it would not kill me because it was a bomb, but kill me because I was a priest." He felt he had not made anything clearer for Fernandez yet. He put his ice down on the handrail and became animated with a desire to impart his train of thought to his friend. "So I figured out there was something about me being a priest that was important. That got me on a track of mind. I started down the track. I was on a sure path. It's like first principles in philosophy, right? If you get good first principles, it's easy to build on them. So I had this good track. I'm a priest, and that mattered to this kid. It mattered to this kid from Staten Island. He didn't want to hurt any of us per se, although he hurt Tommy because he was scared. He looked compassionately at Fernandez, but he knew that the contents of his bag would hurt me in particular, so my mind started rolling down that track. I looked around the room. Several ideas swept by me at once. Stolen host, Staten Island Catholic culture, laboratory. Yes, they started going by me, or I started going by them, like stations on a train track. Host, culture, laboratory. Those things couldn't get me to my goal. They didn't take me to the end of the line. But then inspirations struck me. Not like train stations, not cold hard facts you can walk on, but more like intuitions. Something like sunlight coming in through the train windows, or like the conductor getting on the loudspeaker of the train. And instead of announcing Eltingville Station, he says, "Father White, did you ever try thinking about this idea?" Yes, my rational first principles mingled with light and a voice from above. Father White did not check to see if Fernandez was following anymore, but he was. He said, Like God spoke to you? Yes, but very subtly. No voice, really. A feeling, but more than a feeling. How do I say it? I don't want you to think I'm talking about a subjective emotion. It is just that some people would say that my logic was flawed, that my conclusive evidence does not actually follow from my first line of thought. How can I describe to you why host, culture, laboratory led me to Eucharistic procession, lack of belief in the real presence, and somehow the red light of the sanctuary lamp? Microscope! Fernandez exclaimed much too loudly for a public space. Father White stared at him. Precisely. They smiled at each other. We've arrived at the same station again. Fernandez finished the thought. Anthony, the perp, wanted to look at the host with a microscope to see if the host was God. The cop and the Inquisitor, said White. We both caught him. Which prison will he be freed from first, I wonder? Fernandez heard Father White whisper something to himself that sounded like, he who takes without discerning the body. Hey, Fernandez said, smiling. But what was that ticking noise? Oh yeah, that was a clock. A timer on his phone. Never asked what it was for. Forget about it, said the cop as he ran his hand through his hair and looked up into the sky. The sun warmed his face and felt good. He kept looking up and breathed deeply and exhaled. The air tasted sweet and fresh. A helicopter landed, and Father White's habit began fluttering wildly. He held on to his glasses and tried to grab his Italian ice, but it fell into the water. Fernandez really laughed at him. The end. The end. Oh man, that was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's a long line of Father White Detective series. I hope you enjoy the character. I hope he develops and we get some steam going with it. So anyway, hopefully we can talk about it again sometime. Join me next month. Hopefully I'll have another story for you. And have a great one. Check out our other shows, our TV show, 7-Man Job, if you want. Come pray the rosary with us. Come listen to a sermon. Hopefully get inspired. Check out my kind of goofy talk show, practice talk show from Farrell, Palmcast Tonight. And anyways, thanks for coming by. God bless you. And GK Chesterton, pray for us.